Mayumi has a question. This was one of my as well. Can you describe what your vision would be for this digital newsstand? I think it was Paul that said we would take back Google News and we would be in control of that. How do you see this playing out in terms of the broker that you mentioned that needs to be in the middle of the buyer and seller? What's the future, your perfect outcome?
Yeah, so let me see if I can address that. So there was another question earlier about the difference between a big paper and a small paper. I'm not going to say any names, but let's just pretend like there is a very large newspaper in Washington, D.C., owned by another monopolist, just fictionally. They have the ability to negotiate terms with Google and Facebook so that they don't have to hide their content behind a paywall necessarily. Because when you hide your content behind a paywall, that reduces your visibility in Google's search engine. So what we're attempting to do is not just make rules that encourage the big papers, right? We're trying to encourage the ability for small papers to address their own community. And what I have said in general is this. I got fed up at some point in time with national news, and I adopted the horse days ride rule. And what that means is that if it doesn't happen within a horse days ride of my backyard, probably not going to pay much attention to it. But what happens when my newspaper no longer has the ability to fund journalism at a horse days ride locale? And then instead, what it's simply doing is repeating the AP or repeating the larger news services. So what we want to do is we want to create an environment that rewards journalism, number one, and makes it financially possible for the digital advertising dollars to reach down into the people that want to see the news. I think it's a validation portion as well. Now, am I smart enough to figure out how to do that? No, I am not smart enough to know how to do that. What I am smart enough to do is to know who to call the smart people and to say, this is the idea. We want to capture digital advertising dollars for news content and reward those that publish true, accurate news at a local level from local dollars. Now, is this possible? Well, if Facebook can figure out that I'm talking to my wife last night about diapers and then send me diaper ads, I think they could probably figure out how to give digital advertising dollars to local digital newspapers. So we have reached out to, there's a group called Open Markets Institute, OMI. They're heavily invested in this. If anybody has seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma, you'll see that they are heavily involved in that as well. Yes, there's going to be a new marketplace. There's going to be a new paradigm. And if I have anything to do with it, then I'm going to make sure that the governing board over this new paradigm is consistent of the stakeholders and not just the New York Times, but also the dailies, the weeklies, the locals, those that need a voice. I'll give you another great example. In Puerto Rico, there's a newspaper in Puerto Rico. They've been shut out of the stateside domain from Google unless they play by Google's rules, right? Well, there's a huge diaspora of Puerto Ricans in the United States that would love to be able to have access to a digital newsstand that they can get the Puerto Rican news without having to pay for behind a paywall. You know, take the same example for women, right? There are women-driven newspapers in New York that are focusing on women's health issues, and they're having trouble competing in the digital domain. So there's everything from looking at a regional marketplace to looking at a boutique marketplace to identifying target audiences. But there's also something to be said for just putting out good content There's something to be said for putting out something that's meaningful and important and that people have access to. That's not some blog talking about some conspiracy theory that Google continues to regurgitate, over and over and over. And so I think we have a lot of work to do to restore confidence in the media in the United States. And I think that the more we can get away from the bipolar two television stations that dominate every waiting room in America to get back to more fact-based news, the better off that our country would be.
It's a great point about the consequences. Would have been difficult to predict this 15, 20 years ago, but the news desert's leading to really misinformation because there's something that needs to fill the gap there, and it ends up being anyone.
Of course, they're playing under, they have Section 230, Google and Facebook. Right. They can take advantage of too, while we have to police that very closely. They're allowed to not give a damn whether something's true or false or defamatory. And we put a lot of time and effort into ensuring that what we report is right. It's hard work.
So there are certain publishers that have consolidated positions that would be very influential if they weighed in, but they're not. And some are hoping for a congressional resolution, like in Australia, and others have their own private contracts, and they're just kind of treading water. Some are diverse enough in their holdings that this isn't the primary driving revenue for them. What we need is those papers that are most impacted to do something about this. And what we're hoping for is that the more papers they get involved, the more cover you have, for a lack of a better word, to stand up and say, yes, this is wrong, fix it. Now, by hook or by crook, it's going to happen, right? HD media is not going away. HD media will have a seat at the table when these discussions are had. And so what we really need is, I don't care if you hire me, right? I don't care who you hire. I just want you to just voice what you're saying. Write an editorial. Put something in there. Talk about it. Put it out there. If you have an idea, write about it. Right? If you're seeing that your transition from print to media has increased the people reading your papers. If you had 50 people reading your print and now you have 500 reading your digital, but your advertising dollars went down and you laid off 5 journalists, write about it. Say something about it. Call your congressman. Throw an absolute shit fit. Anyway, I get worked up about this stuff.
You have to keep asking, like, we can't go on like this. I mean, there has to be an end to it. And if we don't stand up and fight for it, then the end will be written for us. So, I do care who you should call these guys. If you're interested, these are the people you should turn to. These guys understand it. They invested a lot of time and effort in it. They're brilliant guys. I just know it from being around them. You absolutely should call them, because these are the guys who are going to fix it. And these are the smartest guys out there. So we have the best team possible. So, and I would say to everybody else too, don't waste too much time worrying what the big guys are doing. I mean, I think it was a great point that Paul just made. There's a certain company out there that we won't name, but they don't give a damn about whether the industry even succeeds. They're in it, and they're going to bleed it dry, cut expenses to the greatest extent they can. They're fighting with another major company right now to try to take them over. They don't care about any. They don't care. It's not even a major source of their revenue or income. So it's not that important. So don't worry about what the big guys are doing. And some of the other big guys, well, they've become smaller for no accident. They weren't very smart along the way, and that's how they got here. The smart people understand that what we're doing is absolutely what you need to do. Stand up and fight, go after them, and try to make a difference. If you stand by and wait for Congress to fix it or for things just to fix themselves, then it's not a very bright way of looking at it.
I just got to echo all the comments here. I've seen it multiple times now. Just seeing this passion from you three is just very inspiring. I think you've piqued a lot of interest today.